We begin the Gemara today on the top of Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. First word on the line where it says Eisvei. This is a question that Rabbi Yochanan will ask Reish Lakish. The Gemara here is in the middle of a discussion regarding a person that accepted upon himself Naziris. And where was he when he accepted upon himself the Naziris? He's in a Beis HaKvaris. He's Tameh. So what happens? So Rabbi Yochanan says the Naziris takes effect. He's not allowed to drink wine. The whole Naziris takes effect. Elamai, the Naziris regarding the Tumah is sort of suspended, as he says. Right? And then when he becomes Toy, so that aspect of the Naziris takes effect as well. Whereas Reish Lakish says that because he's Tameh and the full Naziris can't take effect, so none of the Naziris takes effect. Then when he leaves the Beis HaKvaris and he becomes Tameh, Toy rather, after 7 days, he's going to have to again verbally accept, he's going to have to say something to accept again his Naziris, because the Naziris before did not take effect. That's the machlokes here. So Rabbi Yochanan asks a question on Reish Lakish. Let's see. Eisvei Ein Bein Tamei. So the Braisa here says Ein Bein Tamei Shenazar LeNazir Tor Shenitma. There's no difference between a Tamei that accepts upon himself Naziris while he's Tamei and the Nazir Tahir, a person that was Tahir and he accepted upon himself Naziris and then Shenitma. He later became Tamei. No difference between them. Ella, only the following difference. Tamei Shenazar, a person that was Tamei while he accepted upon himself the Naziros. So Shvi Shaloi Oilolele Minyan. So now, after he leaves the Beis HaKvaris, for example, and he has to be Matayr himself, when you Matayr yourself of Tumas Meis, how many days does that take? 7 days. You have to sprinkle the waters of the Parah Adum on him the 3rd day, the 7th day, and then on the 7th day, he becomes Toy. Right, so the 7th day when he becomes Toy, that's the first day that he can begin counting for his Naziris. For his Naziris, which is Betara. The Nazir Tahir Shenitma, however, a Nazir that was Tahir when he accepted upon himself the Naziris, and then he became Tameh, so Ein Shvi Shaloi Oiloloi Leminyan. The 7th day itself will not be counted as the first day that he could start counting, where a person that was a Tahir, a Nazir Tahir, and became Tameh, so now it nullifies all of his days of Naziris. He has to wait 7 days to become Tahir, and then he has to start all over again. So by this Nazir that was Tahir and became Tameh, the 7th day itself will not count. What's the difference? The difference is simple. The Nazir that was Tameh and now it's the 7th day, he doesn't have to bring any karbanis when he becomes Tahir. Because he was Tameh from the beginning, that was the din of that our Mishnah said, that Einim Mevi Carbon Tumah. Because he was always Tameh from the first moment, he doesn't have to bring any carbon Tumah. If he doesn't have to bring any carbon Tumah, so on the 7th day itself, when he becomes Tahir, even though he still has to go to the mikveh that day, and he's called a full Yaim, he's not really 100% Tahir, but he's Tahir enough to begin his Naziris on the 7th day. Whereas a Nazir Tahir, that became Tameh, so he can't start counting his Naziris again on the 7th day, because on the 8th day, the next day, he has to bring his Karbanis, and only after he brings his Karbanis, for the fact that he became Tameh, could he start counting again. That's the difference between these two types of Nazirim. Okay.
On the 8th day, you'll be...
That's the first day that he counts, yeah. And the next day, on the 8th day, that's when he starts counting. Now the question is, if you're going to say, like Reish Lakish said, that this Nazir that was Tameh from the first moment, so on the 7th day, he doesn't automatically start counting Naziris. He has to accept the Naziris upon himself again. So now that this Nazir that was Tameh from the beginning. So his Naziris, when he becomes Tahir, does not take effect automatically. So amai oiloloi min aminyan. Why does this Braisa say that automatically he starts counting on the 7th day? That he can't start counting automatically on the 7th day. He has to accept the Naziris now again upon himself. In essence, what the Gemara is asking is, as the Rosh and the Taisus explain this, that if this Braisa is coming to point out the differences, right? It's saying there's no difference between the Tameh that was Tameh from the beginning or the Nazir that was Tahir and became Tameh. If it's trying to point out those differences, according to Reish Lakish, this Braisa should have pointed out another difference. That the Nazir that was Tameh from the beginning, when it comes to day 7, he has to accept upon himself a new Naziris. Because basically he's becoming the Nazir now. Whereas the Nazir that was Tahir first and then became Tameh, so it nullifies his Naziris and he has to start counting again, he just starts counting again. He doesn't have to accept his Naziris again from new. So why, according to Reish Lakish, does the Braisa not say this distinction? That's what's bothering the Gemara. So therefore, because of this, the Gemara brings an answer that will change completely the understanding of the machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Oh, Mamar Baravashi. So Mar Baravashi said, Meichal, as far as the Nazir is taking effect, and again, we're talking about the Nazir that's in a Beis HaKvaris. He's Tameh, and he accepts upon himself Naziris. So as far as that Nazir is taking effect now, immediately, Kula Amalei Pligi, nobody argues the Chayla. It actually takes effect. Even Rish Lakish agrees, which means that really right away he's not allowed to drink wine, he's not allowed to cut his hair, and he has to leave the Beis HaKvaris right away, and he doesn't have to accept upon himself the Naziris when he leaves the Beis HaKvaris and becomes Tar. Automatically, that Naziris is already there. Everybody agrees. Ela ki pligi. So what was the machlekes of Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish lemilki? The argument is only regarding the malchus for being tameh, for becoming tameh or being tameh. That's the machlekes. Will you get malchus for this or not? If you accepted your naziris while you were already tameh. Rabbi Yechanan says, given the chayla, since the naziris takes effect, so lucky. So therefore, he gets malchus for this tumah. So if he remains in the Beis HaKvaris extra time, we'll see soon in the Gemara exactly when it is that he gets malchus. But he'll get malchus for being tumah. Reish Lakish Sava, but Reish Lakish says, Loi Loki, he will not get malchus. V'chayla, yes, the naziris does take effect, but he does not get malchus. Right? So basically, you can describe the machlekes of Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish according to this new interpretation. They're only arguing about one detail, just about the malchus. Everything else, the Naziris takes effect. Right? The Mishnah clearly said when it comes to the carbon tumah, that everybody agrees that he does not have to bring a carbon tumah for the fact that he was tameh, for the fact that he was in the Beis HaKvaris, because he never was tired in the first place. You only bring a carbon tumah by a Nazir that was tired and became tameh. That everybody agrees. And on the other hand, everybody agrees that the entire Naziros does take effect. The only point that they're arguing about is the malchus for the tumah that he became tameh here. So now the Gemara will basically go through the same three rayas that it brought before. We learned it yesterday, according to the first interpretation of the machlekes of Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. And the Gemara will go through the same thing, the same questions that Rabbi Yechon asked Rish Lakish, according to the new understanding of the machlekes. So Eis Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yechon asked Rish Lakish from the lashon that it says in the Mishnah that we learned on Daf Tezayin. Misha Nazar v'hu beveis HaKvaris. He accepted a naziris upon himself while he's in the Beis HaKvaris. So the Mishnah said, even if he was in the Beis HaKvaris for 30 days, which is the length of time for the minimum Naziris. Those days are not counted for his days of Naziris. And also, carbon tumah. When he leaves the Beis HaKvaris and he's metired himself, he does not have to bring a carbon tumah for this. That's what the Mishnah said. So Rabbi Yechanan is medaye, carbon tumah odolemaisi. Mishnah is saying that only that carbon that's brought for a Nazir that became tumah, that he doesn't have to bring. But it seems like that malchus he will get for the fact that if he's going to stay in the Beis HaKvaris extra time or he's going to be metam himself, he will get malchus for this. Otherwise, the Mishnah should have said that he doesn't get the malchus either. So the Rish Lakish answers, no rai from the Mishnah. Bedino de lisni and eloike. Really, the Mishnah should have said another chiddush that not only there's no carbon tumah, but he doesn't even get malchus at all. Elo, why didn't the Mishnah spell it out? Shum the Kabbalah Misni Seife, because in the next case of the Mishnah, what does it say? That Yotza, this individual that accepted the Naziris in the Beis HaKvaris, but now he left and he was metired himself after 7 days, and Venichnas, he went right back into the Beis HaKvaris. So Eilulay min Aminyan. So now, because he left, so this is already a day that starts his count of his Naziris, and maybe carbon tumah. He went back in the Beis HaKvaris, and now for this he does have to bring a carbon tumah. So in the Seifa of the Mishnah, the main point that the Mishnah is trying to tell me is the fact that it brings a carbon tumah. So since there it says carbon tumah, so Tana Reisha, any maybe carbon tumah. So in the Reisha, as a contrast to what it says in the Seifa, it also mentions the fact that it does not bring a carbon tumah. So it's only because of the contrast to what it said in the Seifa that it mentions carbon tumah. But really, according to Rish Lakish, the Mishnah also should have said, a bigger chiddush, that it doesn't even get malchus at all. So there's no rai from the Mishnah against Rish Lakish. Tashema, but now the Gemara brings back again the same Braisa it brought before, and it will ask the question. Rabbi Yechon is going to ask the question Rish Lakish in a little bit of a different way. So what did it say in the Braisa? Ein bein tamish and nazar lenazir tarish and itma. There's no difference between the nazir that accepted his naziris upon himself while he was already tamei, and the nazir that was tahir and then he became tamei. No difference between them. Ella, only the following difference. Shetamish and nazar, a person that was tamei that accepted naziris shvi shalei min aminyan. On the 7th day itself, he could start counting his naziris. because he doesn't have to bring any carbon tuma, so he could start counting on the 7th day itself. The Nazir Tar Shanitma, but a Nazir that was Tar and became Tamei, so now the 7th day itself he cannot start counting his new days for his Nazirus because he has to still bring a carbon. He has to wait till the next day. So this Braise is spelling out what is the difference between them. And the only difference it says is this detail. Whether they can start the count on the 7th day or he has to wait till the next day. Malchus, but the Braise does not mention that there's another distinction between them, that one gets Malchus and one does not for becoming Tamei. So Malchus, it seems like that regarding getting Malchus, if any of them made themselves Tamei, Zev Zeh Shavin, they're both the same. If they would have been different, like Rish Lakish said, that the Nazir that was Tar and became Tamei gets Malchus, and the Nazir that was Tamei from the beginning does not get Malchus, so then the Braise should have said that this is another difference regarding Malchus. Braise doesn't say that. Amalei, so Rish Lakish will answer, he'll say, Loi, that's not what you should be medayik from this Braise. Don't be medayik that regarding Malchus they're the same. Rather, be medayik l'tiglachas zev zeh shavin. Regarding the halacha that both of them, the Nazir that was Tar and the Nazir that was Tamei from the beginning, regarding the halacha of taglachas, the halacha of a Nazir that he's not allowed to cut his hair, or also that he's not allowed to drink wine, regarding those halachas of the Naziris, they're the same. That's what you should be medayik from this Braise. Yeah, but the Gemara presses on further. So what are you telling me? Malchus mai. But regarding getting Malchus for becoming Tamei, so what are you going to say? Zeh loike, v'zeh eina loike, like Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says that the Nazir that was Tar from the beginning will get Malchus, and the Nazir that was Tamei from the beginning will not get Malchus. So if so, listen, why doesn't the Braise say this distinction? It seems like this Braise is coming to explain that what are the differences between them. So it should mention this distinction. So the Gemara answers, that's not a question. Bitakante koi, this Braise, when it's pointing out the difference, it's only referring to the difference when it comes to the takana, when it comes to the rectification, meaning going forward, starting to count your new proper Naziris. At what point could you start to count your new proper Naziris? That's what this Braise is focusing on. And on that it's saying the distinction, whether you could start counting on the 7th day or you have to wait till the next day, to the 8th day. But bikalkule loy kamairi. This Braise is not talking about the difference between these two Nazirim regarding what it ruined, what it did wrong, regarding becoming Tamei, whether the person will get Malchus or not. The Braise is not talking about that. It's only talking about the tikkun. When could he begin his tikkun of his Naziris? So therefore, no proof from this Braise regarding the halacha of Malchus. Tashama.
No proof. So what's it then?
So you could still say like Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says that the Nazir that was Tar in the beginning gets Malchus for becoming Tamei. A Nazir that was Tamei from the beginning, not it's Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish is the one that made the distinction. Rish Lakish said that the one that was Tamei in the beginning does not get Malchus, and the one that was Tar in the beginning does get Malchus. We can still say that this distinction. And the Braise doesn't mention it because the Braise is only talking about the tikkun of the Nazir. It's not getting into this point. Okay, but the Gemara now brings a final raya to refute Rish Lakish's opinion. And this is also a Braise that was quoted before on Daf Tezayin Amud Beis. So Tashama, the Braise says, Mi shahaya tamei, a person that was tamei v'nazar and he accepts his naziris in that condition of tamei. So aser legaleach v'lishtus yayin. He's not allowed to cut his hair. He's not allowed to drink wine. And others add over here. I mean, the Braise, when it was quoted before, actually added in here that also v'letamei lemesim. He's not allowed to become tamei either. And ve'im gilach v'shasa yain v'nitma lemesim. If he did any of these, if he cut his hair, or he drank wine, or he became tamei, harei zeh soifikis arba'im. He gets Malchus for this. So the Braise is very clear. The Braise says clearly that if he became tamei, he'll get Malchus. And it puts all three together, right? Cutting hair, drinking wine, becoming tamei, that in all these three you get Malchus. To Yufte. So this clearly refutes what Rish Lakish said, that this person that accepted the Naziris upon himself when he was already Tamei does not get Malchus. The Braise clearly says that he does get Malchus. Okay, the Rosh, the Taisus over here, though, do point out, as I mentioned, this Braise was quoted already before in the end of Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, and before the Gemara said that you could say that when this Braise says that you get Malchus, this person that became Tamei Lamesim, he gets Malchus, the Gemara says, if you look at the first line of the Amud here, he left, he became tired, he started already counting his Naziris of Tara, and then he went back in. Only then does he get Malchus. That's how the Gemara answered before. Why doesn't the Gemara answer that over here? So the Rosh explains that it's a very big difference what the Gemara said before and what it said now. Before, Gemara understood the Rish Lakish's opinion different. The Gemara understood that Rish Lakish's opinion is that this Nazir that accepted the Naziris upon himself while he was in the Beis HaKvaris, no aspect of the Naziris took effect. Not for the drinking wine, not for the hair, not for tumah, nothing. And therefore we could say, when the Braisa puts together these three categories, that he gets malchus for either cutting his hair, drinking wine, or becoming tameh, for all three of them, what is it talking about? When he left and he was metired himself, and now he starts his Naziris, and for all three of them, only then he'll get malchus. But now we changed our understanding of Rish Lakish's opinion. Now we said that Rish Lakish's opinion is that the Naziris is really chal. Even Rish Lakish agrees for the cutting of the hair and for the wine, the Naziris really all takes effect. It's only for the tumah that the Naziris does not take effect, that he will not get malchus for the tumah. So you can't now say that regarding the tumah, when it says that he gets malchus, it means if he became tahir and then he walked back in. Because then it's not going to be the same to the other two things that the Braisa mentions. The Braisa also mentions cutting the hair and drinking wine. And it says it together. The Braisa is saying regarding all three of them together that you get malchus. So what are you going to say? Regarding taglachas and the wine, he gets malchus right away. And regarding tumah, he's only going to get malchus if he becomes tired and then becomes tameh. It doesn't go together. The Braisa says regarding all three of them that he gets malchus right now. So therefore, this refutes Rish Lakish's opinion. Okay, so now based on this, so we know that everybody holds that this person that was in the Beis HaKvaris, accepted upon himself Naziris, he will get malchus for tumah. So the question is, what's this tumah that he gets malchus for? If he stays in the Beis HaKvaris, he gets malchus. At what point does he get malchus exactly? That's the discussion on the Gemara. So Rav asked the Shaila. So Nazir v'hu beveis HaKvaris, this Nazir that accepts upon himself Naziris while he's in the Beis HaKvaris, so mahu. What's the din? Exactly when does he get malchus for becoming tameh? Boy shehiyeh lemalchus. Will he have to remain in the Beis HaKvaris a certain period of time to get malchus? Or there is no period of time that he would have to stay in the Beis HaKvaris. If he doesn't leave immediately, he'll get malchus. Okay, so what is this shehiyeh that the Gemara is talking about? So we'll see soon in the Gemara. The shehiyeh the Gemara is talking about over here is similar to what you find regarding a person that enters into the Azara. And while he's in the Azara, he becomes tameh. An aynus happens and he becomes tameh. So if you're in the Azara, b'tumeh, you get malchus for that, or you get kares for that actually. At what point though do you get kares? Only if there's a halacha l'moshe misinai. Only if you remained in the Azara long enough that it takes for a person to do ishtachava, to prostrate, to bow down. But if a person did not remain in the Beis HaKvaris that amount of time, he does not get malchus. So the question is, do I apply the same concept like we find tumah and being dazara regarding this nazir that's in the Beis HaKvaris, that'll only get malchus if he remains there that amount of time? Or no, or maybe if he doesn't leave there instantly, immediately, he's going to get malchus. So the Gemara spells out in what case exactly is Rava asking this shaila. Hey chidami, what's the scenario that we're talking about? If you're going to say the case here is, this person is standing in the Beis HaKvaris and he's about to accept upon himself Naziris. You see, he says, I want to accept upon myself Naziris. And people that are standing there are warning him. The Amrile, they're telling him, Loi Tinzar, do not accept upon yourself Naziris. Because if you're going to accept upon yourself Naziris, you're not allowed to become Tameh. And you're standing in the Beis HaKvaris and you're going to be Tameh right away. So if that's the case, this person is deliberately accepting upon himself Naziris in a place that he will be Tameh. So Lama Li Shehiyah. Lama Li Shehiyah, why should I say that this person should have to wait some time for him to be over on this Isser? This person accepted upon himself this Naziris deliberately, knowing that he's going to become Tameh. So if he doesn't leave instantly, he's going to be Chayiv Malchus for sure. He did it b'mezid. It's not like the case of over there in the Azara, where the person became Tameh b'aynis. Over there he has a certain time that the Kedei Hishtachava, as I mentioned, for him to leave. But over here he did it b'mezid. And the Gemara explains, Nazir...
That's before becoming Tomei. They know he's going to become Tomei.
He's standing in the Beis HaKvaris. He's standing in the Beis HaKvaris. He's not a Nazir. He's being warned. Don't accept upon yourself Naziris because you're in the Beis HaKvaris. Right? The Gemara now spells this out. The Gemara explains. The Bacher adds a word into the Gemara. Nazir tahir, my time eloi boy shia. A Nazir that's tahir. He was standing outside the Beis HaKvaris. And if he goes and b'mezid walks into a Beis HaKvaris, So he immediately becomes Tamei, and he's immediately Chayiv Malkus. There's no halacha of Shehiyah. He doesn't have to stay in the Beis HaKvaris a certain length of time to be Chayiv Malkus. Why not? The Kamasri Bey, because he was warned before he walked into the Beis HaKvaris. So Hanami Kamasri Bey. Over here, this individual, he was standing inside the Beis HaKvaris when he accepted upon himself the Naziris, but it doesn't matter. He was warned not to accept upon himself Naziris, so he should get Malkus for the very first moment that he's there. So Ella, the Gemara says, the Ibaya of Rave was regarding a situation similar to the story of a person that's in Dazare where Einis occurred. What happened? Kagain, for example, Shenichnas, Beshida, Teva, or Migdal. A person entered into the Beis HaKvaris and he's there inside some kind of a box, or in a closet, or in a carriage. He's covered from all sides, and therefore he's in sort of in an oil for itself. He's not exposed at all to the Tumah of the Beis HaKvaris. And so now he's there, and while he's there, he accepts upon himself Naziris, but it's okay. He's not exposed to the Beis HaKvaris. And now Einis happens. Uba Chaveda, his friend comes. Upara me'alav maziva, and his friend opens up a place on the bottom of this box or of this closet, and now he's exposed to the Beis HaKvaris. So now the question is, at what point does this person get Malkus if he stays there? So do I say, because the Einis happened, I learned this out from the halacha of Tumah and Da'azara? Or maybe not. And the Gemara explains, Ki gemirin shehiyeh bebeis hamikdash. Do I say gemirin? Gemirin means we learn out, we have a tradition, which is the halacha l'Moshe misinai. This idea that in Da'azara there's a certain amount of time it takes to bow down. Only if you stay there, that amount of time do you get kares. So do I say that that's only in the Beis HaMikdash? Outside the Beis HaMikdash, here, regarding a Nazir in the Beis HaKvaris, that halach l'Moshe Misinai does not apply. Or perhaps I could say, loishna, there's no difference. Just like in the Azara we have this shear, the same shear applies over here. So here, this was the question of Rav, basically a situation of an Einis. Do I apply the same concept that you have in the Azara, the same amount of time or not? Teiku, the Gemara says, this remains unresolved. Another Ibaye the Gemara has about this Nazir that accepted upon himself Naziris while it was Tami. Boy, Rav Ashi asked the Shaila, Nazar v'hu beveis hakvaris. He accepted upon himself Naziris and he's in the Beis HaKvaris. So according to what we learned before, what do we already know? We know that the Naziris takes effect, and it takes effect even for everything. Like we learned before, we refuted the Shlakish's opinion, he's going to get Malkus if he becomes Tamei. For what does it not take effect? So we learned in the Mishnah that when he becomes Toid, he will not have to bring a carbon for the fact that he was Tamei. That's the only thing it doesn't take effect for. But now the question is, Ton Giluach Oiloi. Will he have to cut is here when he becomes, on the seventh day that is, right? So he's going to be Matayr himself. And then on the seventh day, so usually on Nazir that becomes Tamei, on the seventh day when he's Matayr himself, he has to cut his hair and bring Karbanis and start his Naziris over again. This Nazir here that was Tamei from the first point, and then he's being Matayr himself, does he have to cut his hair or not? Do I say, Ki boy taglachas, when does this halacha apply that you have to cut your hair? That's Tarish and Itma. A Nazir that was Tahir and he became Tamei, and the Kametame le Naziru say. So because he was Matame, his days of Naziris, which were Tahir, so he has to bring a carbon, and he also has to cut his hair and start his Naziris over again. Avol Tamei Shenazar light, but maybe a Nazir that was Tamei from the first point, just like he doesn't have to bring a carbon for that Tumah when he's Matayr himself, he also doesn't have to cut his hair. And on the seventh day, he just starts counting his Naziris with Tara, that is. Idilme loishna, or maybe there's no distinction. Maybe I say that just like, again, what's the Gemara saying over here? 1 second. Idilme loishna, or I say that there's no distinction, that he does have to cut his hair. Taka the carbon he does not have to bring. That the Gemara will actually bring later. We'll see on Daf Yud Ches. The Gemara is going to bring a pasuk. We learn out from the pasuk, the way most Rishonim understand this. The Mishnah quoted the pasuk. The Mishnah said, "V'hayamim harishayim yiplu," that the idea of bringing a carbon for your tumah is only if you had yamim rishayim where you were tahir and now you became tameh. That's when you have to bring a carbon. But who says that pasuk teaches the same regarding cutting your hair? Maybe you do have to cut your hair, right? Or maybe not. Or maybe just like you don't have to bring a carbon, you also don't have to cut your hair. That's the shaila.
Don't you cut your hair before you have to bring a carbon?
Maybe they're connected. If you look in the simple pshat of the pasuk, it does seem to go together. Yeah. But the Gemara here has a swara to say that the cutting of the hair and the carbon regarding the tumah in this situation, maybe it doesn't go together. There's a discussion in Rishonim about this. Why there's a swara to separate them. So Toshema, the Gemara says here. Let's see what it said in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Misha nazavu beveis hakvaris. He accepted upon himself Naziris and he's already in the beis hakvaris, so he's tamei. Even if he was there for 30 days, it's not the count of his Naziris petara. Carbon tumah. When he's metired himself, he does not have to bring a carbon tumah for this. So the Gemara is medayik. What do I see from the Mishnah? Carbon tumah hudule maisi. All the Mishnah mentions is that he doesn't have to bring the carbon. Avol giluchi boy. But it seems that cutting his hair, that part that he has to do when he's metired himself, that the Mishnah doesn't mention, so that he should have to cut his hair. The Gemara says, no, there's no raya from a Mishnah. Why not? Because matam kamar. The Mishnah is saying, according to what the Mishnah is saying, we can understand the reason. There's a reason over here. We're saying that all the special halachas that apply to the Nazir that has to be metired himself, they don't apply. Matam enim mevin carbon tumah. What's the reason why he doesn't bring a carbon tumah? Mishum delay ba'i geluchi. Because he doesn't have to cut his hair as well. In other words, what the Gemara is saying is it goes together. Just like he doesn't have to bring a carbon tumah, he doesn't have to cut his hair as well. So the Mishnah Taka doesn't spell it out, but it goes together. So there's no raya from the lashon of the Mishnah. Toshema, the Gemara brings another raya. This is the same brayse that we quoted before. Ein bein tamesh nazar lenazir toish nitma. So this brayse is telling you that there is no difference between the nazir that accepted naziris upon himself when he was tamei and the nazir that began when he was tahir. What's the only difference? Only the time, the 7th day. And the tamesh nazar, the tamei that began his naziris when he was tamei shvi shalei lemin aminyan. So when he's metired himself, he begins his proper naziris on the 7th day. The nazir tahir shanitma, but a nazir that was tahir and became tamei, so ein shvi shalei lemin aminyan. The 7th day does not count for the first day of him counting the naziris again. What's the reason? Because he has to bring a carbon. So he has to bring a carbon. He has to wait until the next day. So what do you see over here? The distinction that this brayse is making between the two is only regarding whether he begins counting his naziris on the 7th day or on the following day. That's it. So my love, don't you think that we can understand from here that when it comes to the fact that you have to cut the hair when you're metar yourself, zev is shaven, they're both the same. The brayse didn't mention this distinction. So the Gemara says, don't be medayik that. Don't be medayik that for cutting the hair they're both the same. Rather, be medayik lemalkus zev is shaven. Regarding getting malchus for being over on any of the halachas of the naziris, drinking wine or making yourself tummy, whatever it is, it's only regarding malchus that they're the same. So says the Gemara, so what does that mean? Avol teglachas mai, but regarding cutting the hair on the day that they're metar themselves, what are you going to say? Zeh megaleach, v'zeh eina megaleach. The nazir that was tar from the beginning and became tamei, he will have to cut his hair on when he's metar himself, and the nazir that was tar from the beginning does not have to cut his hair. So if so, listen, the Tana should say this clearly. Isn't this Tana coming to point out the distinction between the two? So the Gemara explains it's already included in what the Tana said. Tana shvi shaloi v'chol mili. When the Tana makes the distinction regarding the 7th day, that already includes this matter as well. Why? What's the source of the difference? What's the reason of the difference? Why the Nazir that was Tamir from the beginning could start counting his Naziris on the 7th day, and the Nazir that was Tar from the beginning has to wait until the following day? The source of the difference is because the Nazir that was Tamir from the beginning doesn't have to bring any carbon, so he doesn't have to wait until the following day. The Nazir that was Tar from the beginning has to bring a carbon, so he has to wait until the following day. So the difference between them basically is regarding the carbon that you have to bring. So along with that goes also the cutting of the ear. The cutting of the ear goes together with the carbon. So therefore, by the Braisa mentioning this distinction regarding the 7th day, or that you have to wait until the following day, it includes this point. It includes kol mili, it includes the carbon, and it includes also the taglachas. So there's no raya from there. Another raya the Gemara tries to bring, Toshema, the Braisa says as follows. Here this Braisa is going to bring us the source of a halacha that we had mentioned once before. What happens to a Nazir that becomes a mitzayra in the middle of his Naziris? So the days of his tzaras, when he is a mitzayre, do not count for his naziris. It's not going to nullify, the tumah of tzaras is not going to nullify his entire naziris that he has to count from scratch, but it will not count as the days of his naziris. What's the source of that? So the Braisa says, "Ein li elo yemei tumasai shein leimen amin." I would think that we know that the days that a person becomes tamei in middle of his Naziris, like a tumas mace we're talking about, so that's not counted part of his Naziris, and he's going to have to actually start all over again. That the pasuk clearly says. Now, Yemei Chalutoi Minayin, the day that he became a definite Mitzayre, that's what Chaluta here means, there's a Mitzayre where he's still being locked up and it's not clear 100% if he's a Mitzayre, then there's the Mitzayre that's a definite Mitzayre. So if a person is a definite Mitzayre, Minayin, how do I know that those days of his Tumah of Tzaras will not count for the days of his Naziris, even if it doesn't nullify his Naziris, but how do I know that those days don't count as part of his Naziris? So the Gemara said, the Braisa says, Vidinu, I could learn this out. Dinu over here does not mean a kal v'chaimer. Dinu means I could compare it. I could learn it out from the days of a person that's tamei. Ma yemei tumasai, just like a person, if he becomes tamei in the middle of his naziris, what does he have to do? Megaleach. At the end, when he's metired himself, he has to cut his hair, maybe carbon, and he's going to have to bring a carbon and start all over again. Af yemei chalutai, the same thing is also a person that becomes a mitzayra in the middle of being a nazir. What happens when you're done with when the person heals from his tzaras? What does he have to do then? It's very same thing. Megaleach, the halach of a mitzayra also is that he has to cut his hair, maybe carbon, and he also has to bring a carbon for the conclusion of the becoming tired of his tzaras. So therefore we compare the two. And just like by the Tumah it does not count for the days of his Naziris, by the Mitzayr it also doesn't count. But the Gemara says there's no comparison. The Braisa says there's no comparison. Why? By the days of the Tumah. Okay, one second. This is this is a continuation. The Braisa is explaining now the comparison. Okay, soon the Braisa is going to ask on this comparison, but here it's explaining the comparison. Just like the days of the Tumah do not count of part of the days of his Naziros, so too the days of being a Mitzayre don't count as part of the days of your Naziros. Okay, so on this the Braisa asks, it's not the same thing. Lo, you can't compare them. If you say that by the days a person became a Tmei Mace, it doesn't count part of his Naziros, the reason is she came Mevatel Be'enes HaKaidman. There the Torah clearly says, Hayamim HaRishayim Yiplu, that all your days of Naziros are nullified. That's why I say that the days of your Tumah don't count. Which is not the same when it comes to a person that became a Mitzayra. A definite mitzayra, middle of being a nazir, it doesn't nullify the previous days of naziris that you already kept. So therefore, maybe I should still say that those days that he was a mitzayra does count for the days of being a nazir. So the Braisa says, Amrit, you say so. I'll bring you another source, another explanation of how I know that the days of the mitzayra does not count for the Naziris. If you have a Nazir that accepted upon himself the Naziris when he's in a Beis HaKvaris, when he's Tomei. So now the Braisa is bringing up the situation that we're talking about. He accepts the Naziris while he's Tomei. So what's the halacha there? Shesaroi roi l'taglachas. The hair that he's growing at that time is fit to be cut. Right? The hair that he's growing will then be cut. The Gemara will explain what it's referring to. It's going to be cut, but it says that hair is fit to be cut. And nevertheless, those days that he was there in the Beis HaKvaris do not count, and he's going to have to start counting his days of Naziris after he becomes Tahir. Yimei chilutai, the day that the person is a mitzayre, he's a definite mitzayre, she'ein royal teglachas, so he's not fit. The hair that he's growing right now is not fit to be cut for his naziros, and the reason is because this mitzayre is going to have to cut his hair for the tzaras that he has. Right? So therefore, this is not hair that's going to be cut for the conclusion of his naziros. Like Kol Shekain, so most definitely I should say that him keeping his Naziris in these days of being a Mitzayre should not count for his Naziris, because his hair that's growing is not hair that's going to be cut at the conclusion of his Naziris. It's hair that's going to be cut when? At the conclusion of his Tzaras. Most definitely it should not count for the days of his Naziris. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to focus over here on this last point, on the lashon that the Braisa said over here regarding this Nazir that's in the Beis HaKvaris. What did we talk? What did the Braisa say? That the Nazir that is in the Beis HaKvaris, so ein roy. What's the lashon of the Braisa again? Saroi roy letaglachas. That his hair could be cut. What does this mean? My love, don't you think? What is it speaking about? Teglachas tumeh. What it's saying is that the hair that this person is growing while he's in the Beis HaKvaris, when he leaves the Beis HaKvaris and he's metired himself, he's going to have to cut his hair for being metired himself. The Gemara calls that teglachas tumeh. In other words, the fact that he's being metired himself of this tumeh, he's going to have to cut that hair. That is the milah that there is to this Nazir, that we see that this halacha of Naziris applies to him. Okay, so what can we prove from here? So this proves what the shaila that he has to cut his hair. That's what the Braisa is saying. So the Gemara says, loy. That's not what the Braisa meant to say. Teglachas tara. The Braisa rather meant to say the teglachas of his hair that he's going to have to cut, not when he's metired himself when he leaves the Beis HaKvaris. I could still say that when he leaves the Beis HaKvaris and he's metired himself, he does not have to cut his hair. The teglachas of the hair the Braisa is talking about is when he's going to conclude his entire Naziris. Then he has to cut his hair. Right? And the Braisa is saying that the mitzayre, the hair that he's growing now, he will not have to cut then. This is not the hair that he's cutting then when he's going to conclude his Naziris, because he has to cut his hair by the end of his tzaras. And this Nazir that's inside the Beis HaKvaris, this is the hair that he's going to cut later when his Naziris is concluded. Adarabah, he does not cut his hair when he's going to be metired himself. And the Gemara says, Hachanami mistavre. Let's just finish over the Inyan. Hachanami mistavre. It's logical to say that this is what the Braisa means. If the Braisa here is pointing out a distinction between this Nazir and the Beis HaKvaris and the Nazir that became a Mitzayre, and you're telling me that the Braisa is talking about Teglachas Tumeh, and it's saying that the Nazir which is in the Beis HaKvaris has to cut his hair when he's metired himself of his Tumeh. But if so, the same applies to the mitzayre as well. Yimei chalutoi miloi boy teglachas. So this mitzayre that will become toher, that is, from his tzaras, will he not have to cut his hair as well? He'll also have to cut his hair as well when he becomes toher from his tzaras. How could the Braisa make a distinction between the Nazir that's in the Beis HaKvaris and you're saying that he does have to cut his hair, and the mitzayre does not have to cut his hair? A Nazir also has to cut his hair. A Nazir has to cut his hair when his taras ends. Elamai, so the Gemara says it must be that it's saying that the Nazir cuts his hair when he concludes his Naziris. The Nazir that's a mitzayre, he does not cut this hair when he concludes his Naziris, because he has to first cut his hair when he concludes his taras, and then later he's going to cut his hair. So the Gemara says, loy. This is not a raya b'chlal, what you're saying now. Teglachas the Naziris katani. Don't tell me that just like this Nazir which is in the Beis HaKvaris has to cut his hair when he's metired himself, and so too the mitzayre has to cut his hair when he's metired himself. It's not the same thing. The Nazir that cuts his hair when he leaves his Beis HaKvaris has to cut his hair in order to begin his Naziris. He's cutting his hair because he's being metired himself to begin his Naziris. The Nazir that's cutting his hair when he's a Mitzayre, he's not cutting his hair because of the Naziris, he's cutting his hair because he was a Mitzayre. And by the conclusion of the Tzaras, you have to cut your hair. So therefore it's not the same thing, B'chlal. So therefore, in this Braisa, there's no raya. Either way, when the Braisa says over here regarding this Nazir which is in the Beis HaKvaris, and it says that he's roy l'taglachas, it could either mean roy l'taglachas now when he's metired himself of this tumeh, or roy l'taglachas could also mean that he has to cut his hair at his conclusion of his naziris, but not now when he's being metired himself. So there's no raya to the shaila that was asked regarding this Nazir that has to be metired himself.